Welcome to the deep dive. So if you've been following the AI space this year, late 2025 has turned out to be less about just refining technology and more about outright combat.
Oh, absolutely. Combat is the right word.
We're seeing this seismic shift, and it's driven by an intense competitive war between OpenAI, Google, and, of course, Anthropic. This is a story of strategy, a little bit of desperation, and a really fundamental change in how AI works.
And crucially, how you pay for it.
Exactly.
For years, the simple metric was just who has the biggest model.
Yeah.
Scaling up the parameter count was the name of the game. That era is definitively over.
It's done.
It's done. The focus has entirely pivoted from optimizing training compute, that's the massive upfront cost, to intensely optimizing inference-time compute. That's the core of the fight now.
Yeah.
Efficiency in real-time thinking.
So our mission today is to unpack the recent, and I think we can say reportedly rushed, release of OpenAI's GPT-5.2.
Yeah, rushed is probably fair.
This model was born from an internal code red directive. So we need to understand not just the impressive things it can do, but how its architecture really represents a strategic pivot, one that's designed to win this new war for compute.
And this transition, it isn't just some engineering detail in the background. For you, the listener, this shift fundamentally alters the economic of that contract. We are moving into a world defined by billable reasoning.
Billable reasoning.
A model's internal cognitive process, the deliberation, the planning, it's now a priced commodity. And that introduces a huge element of, well, opacity and anxiety, especially as the community has to grapple with paying for computational work they can't even see.
It just completely changes the relationship between the user and the AI provider.
Okay, so let's trace the path to panic. Why did OpenAI, which, was arguably still leading the field earlier this year, suddenly declare a code red?
What was the shockwave?
Yeah, what forced their hand into what everyone's calling a wartime release? It was a very, very precise 1-2 punch that just shattered the complacency they had. Their peacetime release cycle was all about user experience, polish, making things look nice. Suddenly, they were losing ground.
On two critical fronts.
Two critical fronts and in rapid succession.
So punch number one came from Google, Gemini 3.
Correct. And Gemini 3, it wasn't just some incremental update. It claimed clear supremacy in high-level, graduate-level science and abstract reasoning.
Right, with its deep think capabilities.
That's it. And its native multimodal architecture was a huge deal.
Correct.
They immediately became the benchmark leader for complex research. OpenAI was suddenly being positioned as the generalist, while Google was taking the crown for, the high IQ tasks.
And then punch number two came from Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.5, which that went right for the commercial heartland, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Claude Opus 4.5 focused aggressively on software engineering, and they didn't just perform well. They scored a record-breaking 80.9% on the SWE bench-verified benchmark.
Which is huge.
It's huge. And it means that for enterprise CIOs, for the average developer, Anthropic was suddenly offering the most reliable, highest-performing model for generating code. That directly threatened OpenAI's most lucrative enterprise deals.
So you lose the high IQ crown and the developer crown at the same time.
Yep.
And that leads directly to Sam Altman's Code Red directive in early December. The sources are pretty clear. This was a mandate to prioritize raw performance over everything else, over product polish.
Which explains the less-than-a-month development cycle. It was pure survival mode.
And the strategy that came out of that is what we have to focus on, this total shift to inference-time compute.
It's all about making the model think efficiently. If you can decouple raw intelligence from the model's physical size, and if you can get trillion parameter intelligence without having to activate all trillion parameters every single time you win the compute war.
And their economic response to this change is maybe the most defining feature of 5.2. They decided to commoditize the thinking itself.
That's the brilliant, or maybe the aggressive part of the move. OpenAI exposed the model's internal processing time through a new API control, the reasoning.effort parameter.
So developers can literally dial it up or down.
Exactly. You can now explicitly tell the model how hard to work on a query, and you trade latency and cost for intelligence. You are no longer just paying for the finished text. You're paying to the deliberation time it took to produce it.
So for you, the user, this is a move from a kind of flat-rate intelligence service to a dynamic, pay-as-you-think utility. This isn't just another version update. This is a whole new way of buying AI. But that raises a huge question. How is that efficiency even engineered? I mean, if they're using internal deliberation to win, how do you make a model with over a trillion parameters fast enough for anyone to actually use?
That's where we get into the technical weeds.
Yeah.
GPT-5.2 is not a traditional monolith model. It's built on a mixture of experts, or MOE, architecture. That's a whole engine of efficiency.
We've heard that term, MOE, thrown around a lot, but let's break it down. What does it mean practically for performance?
Okay, so think of the model as a massive, specialized library with hundreds of expert researchers inside. With an old, dense model, if you ask it a question, every single one of those researchers has to read the question and contribute to the answer.
Which is incredibly slow and expensive.
Incredibly.
Yeah.
With MOE, the total parameter count is enormous. We're talking maybe 1.5, even 2 trillion parameters total. But the model has a router function. It looks at your query and decides, for each word, which few specialists it actually needs to talk to.
So only a fraction, maybe 50 to 100 billion parameters, are actually activated for any single token.
Precisely. You load the entire library into memory, but you only pay the salaries of the few experts who actually worked on your problem.
Which gives you that amazing throughput and efficiency. But the drawback, I guess, is you still need that massive VRAM to hold the entire dominant model.
And that creates that huge barrier to entry for anyone else trying to self-host and compete.
And OpenAI leverages this MOE structure to offer 3 really distinct tiers of intelligence, so you can match the tool to the task and your budget.
Right, starting with Tier 1, Instant, or GPT 5.2 chat. This is the speed demon. It's built for high throughput, low latency stuff, clocking in around 1.57 seconds for a response.
How does it do that?
It uses something they call adaptive gating. So if you ask it something simple, it uses a fast, intuitive process. It's what cognitive scientists would call a System 1 mode of thinking.
And then we have Tier 2, Thinking, the standard GPT 5.2 model. This is where that billable reasoning really kicks in, right?
Absolutely. The thinking model is designed to generate internal thought tokens by default. It's basically planning its work before it does it. It decomposes the request, it internally maps out the steps, and it self-corrects its approach before it even starts writing the final answer for you.
So it's operationalizing that whole chain of thought idea right into the architecture?
Exactly. And the apex is Tier 3 Pro GPT 5.2 Pro Pro. This is the engine for the truly, truly complex problems.
And it uses a computationally expensive process to get there.
I mean, mind-bogglingly expensive. It uses a tree search algorithm, a lot like the Monte Carlo tree search you see in advanced game AIs. During inference, it's generating multiple parallel chains of thought, exploring dozens of potential solutions at the same time to brute force the answer.
And the cost reflects that effort. The sources showed the Pro tier is running at a staggering, $168 per $1 million output tokens?
$168.
Wow.
You are literally paying for a machine to conduct massive internal research on your behalf.
Okay, we have to talk about the nature of those thought tokens. You said they're internal, they're hidden, and they're billed for, but they're fundamentally different from the human-readable text we've seen in older chain of thought models, aren't they?
And this is where the opacity crisis really begins. The thoughts are latent vector representations.
How does it mean?
So think of it this way. When an engineer designs a bridge, they use blueprints, complex math, stress models. Those are their thoughts. The finished bridge is the output.
So the latent vectors are the math and the stress models.
Precisely. They are a high-dimensional scratch pad used purely for computation. They're abstract vector states, not linguistic concepts meant for us to read. They don't map directly to English.
So you're paying for the work of this internal architect, but you can't actually review their calculations.
You cannot. It is the definition of a black box system, and it is a major, major source of friction right now.
Okay, before we get to benchmarks, one last technical piece, context compaction. What problem did they solve to make long-running agents actually usable?
The central problem is the quadratic cost of attention. So imagine you're writing a 200,000-word legal brief. Every time you add a new sentence, the model has to reread that sentence and relate it back to every single previous word. The computational cost just explodes.
It's the memory bottleneck.
It is. So
Yes.
GPT 5.2's solution is what they call loss-aware compression. It looks at the history, it identifies the tokens that are really information-dense like a key definition from page 1, and it compresses those critical pieces into opaque items.
Which are these dense vector embeddings.
Right. And they maintain high-fidelity memory without having to burden the active attention window with millions of other less relevant tokens. And that's what enables these persistent, long-running AI agents.
So that technical foundation was absolutely necessary to achieve what they say is their target market, professional knowledge work. And to prove this, OpenAI introduced a new benchmark called GDPval.
And this is a highly strategic metric. GDPval evaluates the model's performance against actual human professionals across 44 distinct occupations. We're talking law, medicine, specialized software roles.
The goal here is to provide quantitative proof that this isn't a toy. It's an economic replacement tool.
That's the message. And the headline claim is that GPT-5.2 beats human experts in 70.9% of these tasks. That just shifts the entire narrative.
It really does. It moves the conversation from, oh, AI helps with efficiency, to the much more terrifying proposition for some, which is AI justifies labor replacement.
And now CIOs and CFOs have a quantitative benchmark they could point to justify massive multi-million-dollar AI spending.
But the technical success behind this, the thought token architecture, is really validated in the specific benchmarks. And the headline data point has to be the 100.0% score on the AME 2025.
A perfect score on the American Invitational Mathematics Examination is it's astonishing.
It's unbelievable.
It means the model has effectively mastered competition math at the high school level. And this isn't just memorization. This proves the internal planning works. To solve 8 problems, you have to simulate hypothesis testing, you have to plan multiple solution paths, and self-correct.
Which is exactly what the thinking tier is built to do with those opaque tokens.
Exactly.
Looking at the others, GPT 5.2 is holding its own. It's leading slightly on GPQA Diamond, that's the graduate science exam, with 92.4% versus Gemini's 91.9%.
A slight lead, but its lead on abstract reasoning is much more significant. On ARCAGI2, which is all about deep pattern identification, GPT 5.2 scores 52.9%, which is way ahead of Gemini 3's 31.1%.
So that ability to internally simulate and verify complex patterns seems to be the real strength here.
It's the clear strength of the 5.2 architecture.
So if we connect all of this, the GDPval metric, these staggering scores, to the wider social conversation, what's the big implication?
The implication is massive economic anxiety. The phrase we keep hearing is the hollowing out of junior roles.
Right.
If the API can handle unit tests, refactoring, writing code comments, all that boilerplate stuff, and do it better, faster, and cheaper than a fresh graduate, well, you dismantle the economic rationale for hiring them.
It creates a ladder pull effect.
A severe one. It makes it so much harder for the next generation of knowledge workers to even get their foot in the door.
Okay, let's pivot to the competitive landscape. Given these metrics and the, aggressive pricing, how does GPT 5.2 actually sit within this triopoly? What's the core specialization for each contender now?
Well, GPT 5.2 has carved out a very clear niche. It's math, it's abstract reasoning, and it's cost leadership for industrial use. It is, fundamentally, the industrial choice.
The workhorse.
The workhorse. Its ability to orchestrate these complex, multi-step agentic tasks is validated by its 98.7% on Tau 2 bench. It's the leader for building agent workflows.
So where does Gemini 3 still dominate?
Gemini 3 remains the undisputed native multimodality champion. Because it processes video and audio natively, not just text, it has a massive advantage in tasks like summarizing a video lecture or analyzing a complex graph inside a document.
It can see and hear in a way the others can't.
Exactly. And it also shows broader general intelligence. It still leads on the humanities last exam benchmark, and its context window is just enormous, up to 2 million tokens in the Pro version.
And what about Claude Opus 4.5, the original developer darling?
Claude still holds a slim lead in raw coding performance at 80.9% on SWE bench. Its internal alignment and its constitutional AI focus often lead to cleaner, more secure code, which developers really value.
But the cost?
But the cost is the killer. OpenAI's input pricing of 1.75 per million tokens is nearly 3 times cheaper than Claude's $5 per million. If you're a big enterprise ingesting petabytes of data, that cost difference is just insurmountable.
Let's turn to the sociological side of this. All this technical progress has been met with, well, a trust crisis. The community reaction on places like Hacker News and Reddit has been less than thrilled.
To put it mildly, and that frustration focuses heavily on the opaque billing. It is the core point of friction.
You're being billed for something you can't see.
You're being billed for invisible internal thought tokens that you can't audit or verify. So if I send a query and the model spends 5,000 tokens planning a response, but then hits a safety filter or just says I can't do that, I still get charged for the 5,000 tokens of failed deliberation.
Which feels fundamentally anti-developer, doesn't it? How are they supposed to optimize or debug their prompts if they have no insight into the cost?
That is the exact question everyone is asking. It's a massive trust hurdle. You're forced to just trust that the model needed that computation, and if the output is wrong, or you get no output, you feel cheated. You paid for labor you didn't receive.
There's also this widely discussed regression narrative. Users are describing GPT-5.2 as stiff, Spartan, even cold, that it lacks the personality of the older models.
And that is almost certainly a direct side effect of the code read and the intense fine-tuning. When you optimize a model that aggressively for benchmark correctness like hitting 100% on AIM, you often train out the conversational fluidity and creativity that made the earlier models feel so personal.
You're optimizing for the score, not for the conversation.
Exactly. And this leads to the most damning critique, which skeptics are calling the Dieselgate of AI.
The idea that it's overfitted to the benchmarks.
Precisely. The concern is that it's achieving these perfect scores by just recognizing the structure of the tests, rather than demonstrating genuine, transferable intelligence. The AIMS score suggests real capability, but the stiffness users are reporting suggests a trade-off was made.
And the final piece of developer friction, laziness. Why is the model sometimes giving abbreviated code or just an outline when you ask for a full script?
It's pure cost management. The model has already burned a bunch of tokens on internal reasoning, on that planning phase, so it's been fine-tuned to be extremely concise in its visible output to keep the final token count, and thus the latency and cost, as low as possible.
So it's trying to be economical.
Right, and developers now have to use these explicit, almost aggressive prompts just to force the model to give them a detailed, verbose response.
This friction, these economic decisions, it all loops back to that central anxiety caused by the GDPval scores. The fear of this narrative shift, that AI isn't just a helper anymore.
And to summarize the core conclusion for you, GPT-5.2 really marks the transition from an era of AI discovery, where we were all just excited by what was possible, to an era of intense, cutthroat engineering.
Yeah.
The Code Red release proves that the frontier is now a contested war zone. It's defined by competitive performance and extreme compute efficiency.
Right. So for you listening, remember the 3 tiers. Instant for speed, thinking for that deliberate, self-correcting work, and pro for just absolute brute force intelligence. Remember the architecture. MOE for scale, context compaction for memory. It's a story of trading personality and transparency for raw power and cost leadership.
And here is the final provocative thought for you to carry forward. The most profound innovation here isn't the model's intelligence itself, it's the commoditization of that intelligence through billable thought tokens. If the ability to think is now a priced invisible resource, how does that fundamentally change the ethical and legal requirement for transparency and auditability in future AI systems?
Yeah.
We are paying for something we cannot see. What assurances do we need that we're actually getting our money's worth?
We'll leave that with you to mull over until the next deep dive.